He first noticed her on a Wednesday, when the campus cafe had run out of real milk and he had to settle for almond. She walked in like someone who hated the world and had stopped pretending otherwise. Hair swept into a bun that had lost its battle with the breeze, tired heels clicking over linoleum with a limp of a grudge, lips in a straight line that had forgotten how to curve. She didn't belong there, not among half-awake undergrads in sweatpants and graphic tees. She was a contradiction in a tailored blazer, a woman too old for this place but too restless for anywhere else. He noticed the deep line between her brows, the stubborn quiet of someone who had gotten used to disappointment, and most of all, the way she avoided eye contact with anyone who might mistake her for vulnerable. He sat 2 tables away, sipping burnt espresso and pretending to scroll through his phone, but mostly watching her order tea without looking up from her book. A biography of Hannah Arendt. No one just casually reads Arendt. He wondered what made her choose that table by the window, the one seat that the sunlight hid like a spotlight. Maybe she hated shadows more than she hated attention. Maybe she didn't think anyone was watching. But he was, and he had been for days. It took him a week to get near her. Not by coincidence, he planned it. He had seen her there 3 times in 7 days. Always at noon. Always the same order. Always alone. He learned to be there at 11:58. He took the seat nearest hers, set his backpack down like it was nothing, and asked her for the time like he hadn't checked his phone twice. She glanced at her wrist instinctively, frowned, and said, "My watch died. Batteries don't last anymore." Then she went back to her book. That was it. Not the spark of a movie neat cute. No fireworks. Just a dead watch and a colder voice than expected. Still, it was something. The next time he brought a pen. A heavy silver fountain pen that he didn't need, but figured she'd notice. She did. She asked what he was writing. He said, "Nothing important," and she said, "That's the only kind worth writing." It was the first time her eyes lifted to his. They were green, but tired. Still, something in them flickered, surprise maybe, or recognition of someone who might not be completely full of shit. Her name, he learned on the 4th day, was Isabel. Just Isabel. No last name, like she was daring him to want more. She didn't ask for his, and he didn't offer. Instead, they started meeting like clockwork. 2 strangers pretending not to be, circling around conversation like dancers afraid of stepping too close. He learned that she liked silence and disliked men who talked too much. He learned that she worked at the university, some administrative role in the old humanities building, but she never gave details. When he pressed, she deflected. "It's boring," she said. "Not worth your interest." She was always drawing lines he wasn't supposed to cross. It made him want to. He was 23 and bored of girls who lived for Instagram validation, girls who blinked too fast and laughed too loud and needed too much. Isabel didn't need him. She barely seemed to notice him until the day he brought her flowers. He had no plan. It was dumb, impulsive, almost laughable. But he saw the daffodils in the corner shop on the way in, his small, slightly wilted, clumsily wrapped in brown paper, and something about them reminded him of her. Imperfect. Trying. Still yellow. He walked in with them like it was nothing, dropped them on her table, and said, "You look like someone who needed a little less gray today." She stared at them, then at him. For a long second, she didn't move. Then her lips parted in something he hadn't seen on her before, a real smile. Not polite. Not forced. A little crooked, a little shy, but unmistakably hers. "I haven't gotten flowers in 8 years, she said. 8 years is too long, he replied. She picked them up like they were fragile, like they might disappear if she touched them wrong. "That might be the stupidest thing I've heard this week," she said, and then, softer, "But thank you." That was the day he knew he had stepped over some invisible threshold. The day he saw her walls shift. The day he knew this wasn't just curiosity anymore, it was beginning. And beginnings have a way of pretending they'll never end. They never said the word dating. That would have made it real, and real meant consequences. So they kept orbiting under the pretense of coincidence, two people who just happened to end up at the same table at the same time, again and again. But he started to learn her patterns, how she hated Fridays, how she always added honey to her tea but never stirred it, how she never used her phone in public. And she started to notice his, too, how he scribbled song lyrics in the margins of his notebooks, how he always wore a jacket even when it was warm, how his eyes scanned rooms like someone always half expecting bad news. They never called it love. But something kept them showing up. Something more than loneliness. It got complicated around week 7, when she touched his arm without thinking. Just a casual brush as she laughed at something he said, but he felt it like a lit match to dry skin. She pulled away quickly, looked out the window like she hadn't noticed. He didn't say anything either. But the air between them shifted, heavy now, electric and full of questions. He was 23, in his final year at the university. She was 42 and had built her entire identity around being unshakable. At work, they called her the clock. Always precise, always early, never emotional. She had mastered the art of invisibility while sitting in the front row. But around him, that veneer cracked. Slowly. Not in grand gestures, but in little slips, laughing too long, lingering too close, replying to his messages faster than she meant to. And when they finally kissed, behind the humanities building at dusk, hidden in the blue-shadowed silence of ivy and old brick, it was clumsy and hungry and wrong in every way that felt right. That was the night she told him about the divorce. It hadn't been messy, she said. Just a slow unraveling. He had been her husband for 12 years, a lawyer with perfect suits and a perfect grin and a perfect silence when it came to her needs. She left the day she realized she couldn't remember the last time she had wanted to kiss him. No children. No drama. Just a clean break in a half-empty apartment that she'd never fully refurnished. I wasn't sad when it ended, she said. I was sad that I hadn't ended it sooner. He told her about his father. About how he used to teach history before the drinking got worse. About how he once threw a chair at the wall because dinner was cold. About how his mother always said, "He's not always like this," as if that made it better. He left home at 17. Never looked back. But sometimes, in the quiet, the echoes still followed. They started seeing each other in secret. His apartment on Tuesday nights, her car parked far from campus. Long walks in neighborhoods where no one knew either of them. It wasn't a relationship. Not officially. But her head fit perfectly against his shoulder, and he started wearing the cologne she once said smelled like old books and forests. The world outside them didn't exist until it did. The first warning came through a text. Anonymous number. Just a screenshot of the two of them standing a little too close outside a bookstore. No caption. No name. Just the image, timestamped. He stared at it for a long time before showing her. Her face didn't change, but her hands clenched tight. "Do you think it's one of your friends?" she asked. No one knows. They always know. The next day she stopped coming to the cafe. The day after that she didn't answer his messages. On the third day, he went to her office room 214, Old Humanities, the one with the crooked light switch and that ugly chair she always kicked. Her door was closed. A note taped on the front read, "On leave until further notice." He texted her again. One word. Why? She didn't answer for hours. Then finally. Because I don't want to ruin your life. That was when he realized it wasn't just fear. It was guilt. She was afraid that her age, her past, her name would stain his. In her world, a woman over 40 dating a student wasn't just scandalous, it was social suicide. He wasn't her equal in their world, no matter how equal it felt in hers. That night he went to her apartment uninvited. She answered in sweatpants, barefoot, eyes red-rimmed but dry. He didn't ask to come in. He just stood there until she leaned into his chest and whispered, "I want to stop wanting this." And he said, "I don't." The first time he stayed the night, neither of them meant for it to happen. It wasn't planned, romantic, or full of soft music and wine. It was exhaustion. From hiding. From pretending. From fighting the undertow of something that had gone too far to rewind. She had called him late, her voice brittle, cracking around the edges of her usual calm. "There's no one else I can talk to," she said. So he came. Without flowers. Without plans. Just himself and the truth that he didn't want to be anywhere else. They stayed up until 3, curled on the old velvet couch she had inherited from her grandmother, half listening to Miles Davis while the silence between words did most of the talking. There were no promises. No fantasies of forever. Just 1,000 small admissions, dropped like stones into the still water between them. "I hated myself for wanting you," she said once. "I hated every guy you walked past like they didn't exist." She laughed. Not in amusement, but like something broke loose inside her, an old laugh, the kind that hadn't come out in years. Then she looked at him with an intensity that undid him. "I feel alive," she said. "Do you understand what that means at my age? I feel alive again." He didn't answer right away. He just kissed her, slow and certain, because words would have only cheapened it. And when they made love, it wasn't about heat or hunger. It was about seeing each other, finally, without the world between them. Her body was marked with time, faint lines, softness where there used to be tension, scars that didn't need explanation. He didn't care. He loved that she wasn't polished. She was real. Present. Breathing. They began meeting more often after that night. Not just for stolen kisses and whispered confessions, but for living. Grocery runs where they pretended to be strangers in the dairy aisle. Lazy Sundays where she let him read aloud to her from his short stories, her head in his lap. They started sharing toothbrushes. Schedules. Fears. But always behind a veil. She never came to his campus. He never showed up at her work. Their lives outside the walls of her apartment remained separate, necessary illusions to preserve what couldn't survive exposure. They both knew what would happen if word got out. A university scandal. Whispers. Condemnation. It didn't matter that he was an adult. It wouldn't matter that their connection was mutual. She would be painted as predatory. He would be called manipulated. They would be mocked, not understood. So they lived in twilight. Until the night they were seen. They had taken a risk dinner at a tiny jazz bar on the edge of the city, the kind of place that smelled like wood smoke and gin, where no one asked questions. They stayed too long. Laughed too hard. Forgot, for a few hours, that the outside world could still touch them. He reached across the table, brushed a crumb from the corner of her mouth. She caught his hand, kissed it softly. Neither of them noticed the girl near the door. Barely 20, wide-eyed and slightly drunk, a student from his American Lit seminar. She watched them, motionless. When he finally looked up, it was already too late. Her face was full of recognition and confusion and the slow, unmistakable churn of judgment. The next day, the whispers began. It started with stares in the hallway. Then came the texts from friends who suddenly remembered seeing him with someone older. "Dude, was that your mom? Wait, who's the MILF? No way that's serious, right?" And then, the anonymous Twitter account. A blurry photo outside the jazz bar. Just the caption, "When your TA is sleeping with the admin lady twice his age. Stay classy, stay cute." It didn't name them. But it didn't have to. She didn't speak to him for 2 days after the tweet. When she finally did, it was through gritted teeth. "I told you this would happen. I knew this would happen. It was an accident. She saw us, that's all. No. It was inevitable. This isn't a story where we get to walk off into the sunset." "Why not?" he snapped. "Why not us?" Her eyes flared. "Because I've already lived your life. I've already had to rebuild after shame and judgment. You haven't. And now you're going to learn how ugly people get when they think someone doesn't deserve happiness." The room was quiet for a long time. Then he said the thing he shouldn't have said. "So we just stop because the world's too stupid to understand?" She didn't answer. She just turned away. He stood there, alone, hearing the silence say everything. The silence between them didn't break right away. It stretched across days, then weeks, an invisible thread tugging at both ends but refusing to snap. He still messaged her, but the replies came slowly, sparsely. "I need space," she said once. "Please don't make this harder than it already is." So he waited. He threw himself into school, into work, into pretending. But nothing filled the shape she'd left. It wasn't heartbreak in the usual way, it was older, quieter, deeper. Like grief for something still alive but just out of reach. The gossip spread faster than either of them could contain. Professors pulled him aside with concerned looks. His best friend stopped inviting him to parties. He overheard his name spoken in clipped voices, "That guy, the cradle robber, what a joke." No one said her name, but she became the myth, the older woman who had seduced him, the shadowy figure behind his fall from grace. He hated how easy it was for them to turn her into something she wasn't. He thought it would blow over. That they could outlast the whispers. But the university had other ideas. One afternoon, he was called into the academic conduct office. The woman across from him didn't smile. She didn't accuse, either. She just asked questions. Calmly. Carefully. "Have you engaged in any inappropriate relationships with university staff?" "What do you consider inappropriate?" he asked. She didn't answer. Just wrote something down. The next day, he received an official notice, a review hearing had been scheduled. Not a trial, but close enough. Someone had filed a complaint. No one would say who. The hearing would determine whether his behavior had compromised the professional integrity of the academic environment. Bureaucratic poison wrapped in polite language. He didn't know what to do. So he did the only thing he could. He told her. She met him in the park after dusk, beneath an old oak tree whose bark looked like weathered leather. She wore no makeup, no jewelry. Just her face, drawn and pale, and eyes that flicked around the empty benches like she expected ghosts. "I told no one," she said before he could speak. "I know. But it doesn't matter, does it?" "No. Not anymore." She sat down hard, like the weight of everything had finally caught her. "They're going to use this to push me out," she whispered. "They've been waiting. I'm not shiny anymore. I'm too old, too opinionated, too difficult. This gives them an excuse." "Then fight," he said, sitting beside her. She gave him a look that made him feel 12 again. "I've fought, love. Longer than you've been alive." He reached for her hand. She let him take it. And for a moment, they just sat there, two people trying not to sink. "Come with me," he said. She blinked. "To the hearing. Let them see you. Let them hear you. Not the rumors. Not the stories. You." Her laugh was dry. "You want me to walk into a room full of administrators and announce we've been sleeping together?" "No," he said. "I want you to walk in and say we've been seeing each other. Honestly. Willingly. Like grown-ups." She was quiet a long time. Then, "I don't know if I'm brave enough for that anymore." The day of the hearing arrived with cruel timing, rain, gray skies, and a dull ache in his chest that hadn't left in days. He walked into the conference room wearing the only suit he owned. A long table. 4 faculty members. 1 HR representative. A stack of folders. A tape recorder. They asked their questions with the polite precision of people used to avoiding lawsuits. Had he received preferential treatment from any faculty or staff? Had he been coerced? Was he aware of the university's guidelines? He answered honestly. Clearly. Calmly. Then came the door. It opened softly, but the room seemed to tilt. She walked in like a storm, held tightly in a silk blouse and long coat, eyes steeled, hair damp from the rain. She carried no briefcase. No notes. Just herself. No one spoke. "I'd like to speak," she said. There was hesitation. A glance exchanged between panelists. Then a nod. She stepped forward. Slowly. Like each step burned. "My name is Isabelle Laurent. I've worked for this university for 17 years. I have made mistakes. But the only one I regret is believing I had to live invisible to be respected." A breath. "I've been in a relationship with this man for several months. He is an adult. I am not his professor. I never graded him. I never supervised him. We met by chance. We fell in love. I didn't intend to. Neither did he. But we did. And I won't let that be rewritten into something shameful just because it makes you uncomfortable." The room was still. All eyes on them. No one moved. He looked at her and saw it, the same face from that first day in the cafe, but stripped of armor now. Alive. Open. And he knew they'd lose something today. Maybe everything. But not that moment. Not that truth. They weren't expelled, not officially. The university called it a mutual separation. The statement was sterile, as if they had simply drifted apart, nothing sordid, nothing disruptive. But the message was clear, they weren't welcome anymore. He finished his degree elsewhere, online, quietly. No graduation ceremony. No fanfare. Just a digital certificate and a blank space where the last year of his life should have been. She resigned before they could push her. She didn't cry. She didn't explain. She packed up her office in one day, leaving behind a plant, an empty coffee mug, and 17 years of unacknowledged labor. No party. No goodbye emails. Just silence. They stayed together for a while after that. In a little rental house outside the city, near a creek and a bookstore and not much else. No one knew them there. They cooked breakfast in silence, read in the same room, took long walks without holding hands. It wasn't joy, not really. But it was peace. And sometimes that's the most love can give you. But peace is a plateau, not a summit. And eventually, they started noticing the gaps. He wanted to travel, to start over in a place with energy, noise, people who hadn't already judged him. She wanted stillness. A garden. Mornings with tea instead of headlines. She had lived through her storms. He was still restless. She caught him one night staring too long at a train schedule online. He caught her hiding brochures for retirement investments. They didn't fight. They didn't accuse. They just paused. Then one day, while folding laundry, she said, "You're waiting for the next thing. And I'm not the next thing." He didn't deny it. Didn't argue. "I'll always love you," he said instead. She smiled. A real one. Not broken, not bitter. "I know," she said. "That's what makes this hard." He left 2 weeks later. A bus ticket to Chicago, a job at a nonprofit, a future full of maybe. She stayed behind. Bought a dog. Painted the spare room blue. Started tutoring kids at the local library. They wrote to each other sometimes. Long emails. No drama. Just check-ins. Proof of survival. Years passed. One day, he found himself walking through a bookstore in a city he didn't know well. He spotted a woman near the philosophy section, silver now streaking through her dark hair, posture still sharp as ever. She didn't see him. Or maybe she did, and chose not to. He didn't call out. He didn't walk over. He just watched her for a moment, brows furrowed, focused on a book with a cracked spine, and smiled. Because there are some people you don't need to possess to carry with you. Some stories aren't meant to last forever. But they mark you. They burn your name into someone else's memory, and theirs into yours. They had loved. They had been seen. And in a world that tries so hard to erase what it doesn't understand, that had been enough.